Luster stood in the tower, scanning the canopy for any disturbance. Leaning forward, his two blue-scale claws covered the tops of the old battlements. The sunlight catches the iridescent hide, and a blue flame runs up his broad forearms. A finger scrapes the front of the battlement in impatience, digging an ever-increasing scar into the stone. He feels a tug of one of the bony, arm-like protrusions that grow from his back in place of his species' normal leathery wings, and turns to see a green-skinned feminine form draped in jewelry. Mal smiles, with raised eyebrows causing her forehead to wrinkle around her third eye. Bells ring out. Luster and Mal look below them as two large doors creak open and a mob of kids squeeze their way through, unwilling to wait for the doors to clear out of their way. Every one of those kids had made a deal to be here. Every one of them was something unique. From the Arctic wolf pup with black fur to the human child who could hit a nail on the head every time, from across the room. Every one of them a miracle, as Hero would say, and it was this academy's job to look out for them. Mal, taking over lookout duty, Luster heads off into the forest. He navigates himself straight through, not an easy task for everyone, and eventually finds himself at what generations of students have dubbed the Flower Crown. A wall of flowers, bulbous red petals half as big as Luster, growing up the trunks of the great redwoods that encircled the campus. A subtle smell of lavender engulfs him as he pushes his way through. He walks up to the cliff's edge, rounded to a straight drop before tucking under, leaving a deadly gap between land and sea. The water shone gold as the sun set, but everything graying out quickly as it moved behind the dark clouds lining the horizon. Darkness fell and lights began to shine through the leaves. Small lizards shone spotlights from the flat noses, causing rainbows to dance across the plants as they reflected off Luster's scales. He waved them off. The lights dimmed, and he heard little feet scurrying across the bark. Back at sea, the storm clouds rivaled the night sky in blackness, large churning waves lit up by flashes of lightning. Taking in the salt air, the lavender that lingered in his nose was overtaken by a waft of rotting meat. One of them had followed him. He needed to chase them off, if only to stop the flowers from turning putrid and ruining the night air. He goes to face the crown and barely registers the long black hair before its owner barges straight into his stomach. He stumbles back a step too close to the cliffside for comfort. He raises his head to see a young girl, one icy blue eye wide open and staring, frozen in shock at what she just did. A chuckling draws Luster's gaze to the wall of green behind her, and a few sets of blue pincers pushing leaves aside. The voices stopped, and the pincers disappeared with the sound of a few someone scrambling back through the brush. The girl looked behind her to find nobody and angrily whispered, "You promised." Luster hunches down onto all fours, closer to the girl's height, and says, "Pretty sure you've been tricked. Princey likes to do that to people who didn't make their own deal." You arrive, he befriends you, and convinces you of some conspiracy. Luster rolls his eyes. But you're fine. Get back to the door. Luster turns, and with a running start, dives off the edge. He was off duty. It wasn't his problem, and without his presence to calm them, the flowers would stop her from wandering. Splashing into the water, he swims towards the underside of the cliff that is packed with sea turtles riding the current that rushed past. He swam up to one, no smaller than a horse, and managed to climb on its back. With a hard pat on the shell, it took off from the crowd, moving past all the others still casually swimming. It maneuvered around what could be mistaken for giant white tree trunks that jutted from the cliff into the sea. He shivered, but shook off the eerie feeling this place gave, and soon arrived at the beach. The sand stretched for miles off to his left, but he headed to the right, passing by statues of soldiers in gallant poses to the hill of white stone. He stepped up to the cave entrance, mice skirting around his feet. The sand felt stranger than it should. Stepping off the school grounds felt like a different world. Coming out the other side of the cave, the scene became clearer. He emerged from the eye socket of a skull half buried in the sand. The remains of the giant reptile held the school on the back of its shell, in death giving them a safe place to exist. It was Luster's home, and no matter how far he dared wander, he was always drawn back to it, like the sea turtles that surrounded it seemed drawn to their ancestor. From the bushes that line the beach out scurries a green log with a set of pincers and spindly legs. Before he can react, the sound of squelching sand draws his attention back to the shore, where a webbed, spine-covered humanoid drags itself out of the water and onto two legs. He lifts his arms up, ready to align his natural armor to defend himself. More footsteps bring his attention back to the skull cave, where the same girl from the cliffside peeks out from behind the bone wall. The bug clicks its pincers, and Luster prepares for the army that is about to descend on them. A dark, shifting, buzzing cloud rises over them into the air. He runs back to the cave, grabbing the girl's hand and pulling her with him. A spine hits his shoulder, glancing off his diamond scales. He backs them up against a nasal ridge, coaxing the little girl behind him. Luster inhales deeply. With a breath, the shadows of the cave are dispelled by a stream of flames. Red and yellow flicker with green and purple. The swarm shrunk away. The merfolk had gone to ambush them at the seaside entrance, but stood just outside. It patiently waited for the colorful display to end and a chance to pounce. Breath running out, Luster felt his feet sink as dry sand turned wet from the waves of high tide. Luster pulls the girl out of the mud, her smaller feet having sunk further than his. I'll draw their attention. Before he could finish, he heard the clicking of the large bug. They ran to the entrance, and mustering up more flames, Luster bombarded the direction the sound was coming from. Despite this, the queen rushed forward, striking out with its pincers. Not to be forgotten, the merfolk came stumbling out of the skull cave. He speaks without turning around. Its fin is down the beach. Just follow the shell. He runs straight towards the large stick bug. Immediately, it lashes out, and Luster's arms are trapped in its pincers. Twisting to the side, he pulls the queen off balance and strikes out with the remnants of his wing at the merfolk as it tries to pass by. As it reeled back, the girl came running and slammed into it, bringing it to the ground. The pincers released Luster as the bug tried to right itself. They both backed up to each other. He looked at her, and with a step of a foot, he read her mind. Recognizing the stance from his own time in the self-defense classes, he matched her, and they both launched forward to attack. Dodging being crushed, they both grabbed a claw and slammed it into the sand. It quickly wiggles one free, but they were both off, sprinting down the beach, keeping track of each other at the corner of their vision. A crashing and squealing comes from behind them. A rock had fallen from above, nearly landing squarely on the queen, as if the turtle they called home had tried to protect them. The white tree trunk of the fin bone was ahead of them, giving them a ramp back to the top. Luster lifts the girl onto the bone and scrambles up with his own claws and wings. Running up, Luster turns to see the queen and her miniature versions that had joined somewhere along the way. His muzzle clenches in a growl, licks of flame sneaking through. Trapped in a line, only one way up, he opens his mouth, and a plume of flame rolls down the bone. Shadows dance and flicker in the light of the flames, in places scorching the bone black. Luster tilted forward, nearly crashing to the ground until a laugh snaps him back enough to catch himself. Racing down to the beach was a purple-suited figure. They were rushing straight into a large mass of green amphibious humanoids. The merfolk had caught up and had called in family as well. The merfolk shambled across the sand like a horde of zombies. A purple blur bounced around the battlefield, leaping into the air, gliding between targets. They landed hit after hit, merfolk falling to the ground. Luster coaxed the girl towards the forest at the top and back towards their home waiting inside. Luster and the girl climbed onto the ridge of the shell, using the 10-foot fern leaves that grow along the edge as ropes to pull themselves up. Behind them, the new arrival danced up the fin, a few remnants of merfolk trying to follow. Fan bounced up to the other two and began to brush their hands along the ferns that lined the edge of the shell, which shivered in response. They looked back at them with a fiendishly wide smile and smacked one. It began to swing, hitting the ones next to it and triggering a chain reaction of them all flailing faster and faster. Grunts were heard from behind the leaves as they pushed back the merfolk's attack. "Thanks, Fan," Luster said, matching the mischievous grin with his own unintentionally intimidating smile. To be fair, it was hard for teeth that sharp to make a gentle smile. Luster glances to the girl. They know all the secrets of the forest. We'll be home in no time. The three walked away to the merfolk's gurgling yells as they barreled down to the beach below.